Number 10, Texas A&M. Aggies, 2.5-point favorites on the road at South Carolina. How about that spread? The over-under I have for this one is 9 South Carolina TFLs. That's their average in SEC play. That's good. That's really good. A&M has only allowed 4 TFLs per game in SEC play, which is number 2 in the SEC behind, obviously, LSU. Something tells me that this will be a different kind of matchup for that group on the road, the Maroon Goons, as they are so lovingly called. It is a great nickname for an offensive line. Maroon Goons, come on. How can you not love that? Gamecocks coming off of a bye, though, as well. Maybe a chance to get even healthier at certain spots for them. But I think it's also going to be different for South Carolina if Marcel Reed's at quarterback, which I would expect that to be the case after,
as an expert opinion, it is different when Marcel Reed comes in.
Oh, you agree with that? You think?
Yeah, I have some experience there, I can tell you.
Yeah. If that's the case, Gamecocks are not going to get as many opportunities to be able to pin their ears back with what he does well as a mobile quarterback, a guy that you can have the design runs for. He can scramble. He can do a lot of different things. You're still going to be a run-heavy offense, even if he's not getting those design runs. South Carolina has the number 7 run defense in America in terms of rushing yards per game allowed. Some of that's skewed a little bit by the high sack numbers. I really wish that's the thing I need to get in touch with the people at CFB Stats to see if they can come up with the sack adjusted rushing yards.
Can we book a time at media days? I saw some random people. Can we just book a time and be like, all right, guys, passer rating, sack adjusted. Okay, let's get these stats right because this is ridiculous. I can't figure out if a team had a good rushing day or not if they're Colorado.
Yeah, exactly. It's very difficult. You have to go through an actual look at the individual game log, and it's sack adjusted
math. I'm not doing math.
Normalized sack adjusted rushing yards. That's the nerdiest thing I've said on this podcast, but it's very, very true. So I think if you look at the Marcel Reed version of this Texas A&M Colin Klein offense, it has to be able to stay on schedule. Okay, that's obvious. I need to reference this because how quickly it was forgotten in the midst of that blitzkrieg that was Saturday night against LSU. When Elko switched back to Connor Wigman, at the time, A&M had the worst passing offense in the SEC. And the thinking was Elko wanted Wigman, the more polished passer, to come in and elevate that passing game and thus elevate the ceiling of that offense. In the 2 games that Reed started with teams that actually prepped to face him, and I'm excluding Florida from that because I sure as heck thought Connor Wigman was starting that football game up until the game time decision to start Marcel Reed. In those 2 games, he had 26 points and 6 yards per pass against Bowling Green, and then 21 points and 7.4 yards per pass against Arkansas. If we want to include the Florida game and pretend that they were actually prepping for him and not Connor Wigman, Marcel Reed had 178 passing yards, 73 of which came on a play that Cyrus Allen, if you go back and watch it, he had a full 10 yards of separation on the Florida secondary. It was like, oh my God, throw this into the ocean and you won't miss him. Not trying to take away from a developing player, a redshirt freshman, not as PFF called him, a true freshman. Marcel Reed was indeed on that team last year. But just temper expectations. Temper some expectations. I'm going to be incredibly impressed if Marcel Reed can navigate that South Carolina front and that atmosphere. That is no small feat if you can do that. And perhaps that's why that spread is where it's at just 2.5 points as we sit here and talk on Wednesday afternoon. On the flip side, Will. Oh, no, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead. If you get the other team preview, go ahead.
Yeah, I would also be really impressed if Lenora Sellers did the same thing against that Texas A&M defensive line. These are 2 of the best defensive lines in all of college football, with dudes that legitimately scare you up front that can change everything you want and plan to do on offense. If he operates on schedule, different story. But I don't know that you can assume that he's going to get those short fields like he got against Oklahoma when there was 24-0 when they had 72 total yards of offense. Life is pretty easy on a quarterback when that's the head start that you get. He had a great drive early to start that game, but still very favorable situation that he walked into thanks to his defense. A&M is going to make that task a lot tougher. Okay, not just those guys up front, but York, I think, has been tremendous. Torian York has been just the ideal captain in the Mike Elko defense. This is a great matchup for South Carolina's defensive line. It really is. It is an opportunity to perhaps catch A&M a little bit off guard. I think until you see the Kyle Kennards of the world, the Dylan Stewarts of the world, you see their get off, it can kind of take you back a little bit. Even those Alabama players seemed like they were really taken aback a bit by those guys up front. But it just kind of speaks to the parity of the SEC that the spread is so minimal when we're talking about the last remaining unbeaten team in conference play against the South Carolina team that was picked to finish 13th in the SEC. Yet here we are talking about a game that could go either way, I think. I'm going to predict some chaos, Will. It's been one of those years. Man. I'm going to say South Carolina gets like a vintage Rocket Sanders game. Gamecocks win 24-21. Sandstorm, blasting. Everybody's got it ringing in their eardrums when head hits pillow on Saturday night. I'm going to say that the SEC race opens up even more.
Yeah, I feel like I feel my knuckles becoming white as I am squeezing my hand here because I'm thinking how much I actually like this matchup for South Carolina and how upset I am that LSU got just cooked by Reed. And I think you spoke on the exact paradox that A&M is in, which is that the games that Reed has started, where they've had time to prepare for him, it's been different, And that being said, if I were to give an SEC team time to prepare for that person, South Carolina's got as good personnel as anybody in the SEC when it comes to it. And A&M had this tackle, or has the tackle Zune that I didn't know his name in the beginning of the year. I just kept saying the A&M tackle. He's really good. He's right up there with Will Campbell. But the interior has always been something, like I said, for LSU that they've just struggled. It's why they couldn't run the football against A&M. I think that the interior of South Carolina's D-line is just better than LSU's. I think LSU has a couple of really key guys. Talking about Weeks, talking about Swinson, get Penn in there sometimes, But in terms of the middle of this LSU defense is still pretty soft, just to be honest with you. And they got punched in the mouth over and over and over again. I meant to say this in the recap pod. Bad week to teach my girl the phrase "you got mossed" because buddy did we. Anyway,
yikes! That's a different type of "you got mossed." Having that dude run all over you, man. He's been great.
Girl going, I regret to inform you, you got mossed. And I'm like, yeah, I sure did, buddy. Anyway, so point being, yeah, I mean that was what really opened it up for A&M was the fact that Moss couldn't be stopped, right? And at the same time, yeah, I mean Reed did everything he could sideline, or did was amazing sideline to sideline. But what LSU had to start kind of truncating the defense to just stop them from running up the middle, Reed was just taking off. And I think that somehow South Carolina has gotten a much deeper defensive line. They've hit the portal we talked about. And I really do like their matchup here against Reed, knowing, because this isn't an if then, right? LSU lost that game for lots of reasons, but LSU's defensive game plan obviously would have been completely different if they knew Reed was playing. We don't think Blake Baker is an idiot, right? He was just prepared for Wickman. And so now we're in a situation here where South Carolina, like you talked about, night game, 7:30 in South Carolina, that environment I have so much respect for it after LSU, was in a dogfight at noon over there, right? They didn't complain about night games. And so point being, I think that having the young redshirt freshman quarterback on the road in that environment, you got Sandstorm going, with LSU, it was, hey, we got to make this guy throw the ball. And like I said, he had 2 attempts. One of them was that crazy one-handed grab by the back.
The other was a dime.
I'm talking about that's the second one. The first one was a one-handed grab by the back, and he took it up the sideline. The second one was the one that was the post up the middle. Nobody was under it. Looked like me playing NCAA. I had that guy get out of position. Anyway, so point being, I think that South Carolina has the ability to pressure with their, just standard without sending a ton of extra guys. And they're going to want Reed to throw the ball. And he didn't have to against LSU. I think that South Carolina has a better D-line. I think they're a little bit more sound. Certainly they're better at special teams. Goodness. I mean, that's the thing. Like we talked about, South Carolina, yeah, they had the rough field goal against LSU, but as a unit, they're always one of the best in America. So if you look at these little edges, I do think South Carolina has a lot to like, especially with A&M, getting a completely different season than they expected. You always talk about we expect to win every game, but when you lose Notre Dame, you're a young team, you just met your head coach, all this different stuff, and now you're the hunted. We've talked about that with Kirby and how hard it is to be the hunted every week. I think the A&M does struggle here, but ultimately doesn't affect their season too much because they're already so far in the driver's seat.
If South Carolina ever had a snap on a field goal like what LSU had with the holder, just not ready for it, and I don't know who ended up getting the majority of the blame pie on that one. The holder obviously looked really bad. It looks bad when the ball hits you in the chest and you look at the football as if you don't know that it's live. He obviously took the brunt of that. If that ever happened to South Carolina, Shane Beamer would march on that field himself and snap the next ball.
Snap the football. That's the thing. Yeah. We asked what Shane Beamer does when things go wrong. He could snap a football. LSU could use Shane Beamer today.
I'm just saying, I will write a blank check to Shane Beamer to teach Claire long snapping when that time comes, if and when that time comes. I think that the dynamic that South Carolina has discovered with this group is so unique. And if I'm coming off a big emotional win, that's not a fun thing to see. It's just not going to be. Now, I'll say this. A&M fans are going to accuse me of being really critical of Marcel Reed. What Marcel Reed did on Saturday night, one of the best relief performances I have ever seen in covering the SEC. All right, like hands down, it was incredible. If he
that was one of those mobile quarterback. I mean, that was Kaepernick against the Packers. It was you probably remember that game where he had like 300 rushing yards in the playoffs against, I think it was the 50-1 team, and it was like, I can't catch this guy. This guy's a giraffe. What's going on?
If we see that version of Marcel Reed step on that field and he navigates this, and A&M is still undefeated and he does things really, really well in this game, I promise I will give your guy that love. And I will give even more love to Mike Elko for navigating this, because for being honest, this is probably a game Jimbo Fisher loses. It just
Most
is.
of these games that they've won. The Arkansas game, yeah. Well, he was all right against Arkansas.
Yeah. And by the way, it's in the eye of the beholder who Mike Elko was going after when he's talking about we're a real program. I don't think he was going after Shane Beamer. That wouldn't make a lot of sense, even though he's the upcoming guy in the schedule. Let's just what we can definitively say, Mike Elko coaches with a chip on his shoulder, and I love it. I absolutely love it. It's great to watch.
Did you ever see the Jungle Book?
The movie? Because I've read the book.
The animated one. He reminds me of Baloo from the Jungle Book on the sidelines. He's like he's like a sassy Baloo.
He's a great cusser on the sideline. Great.
Yes.
Oh,
and
tremendous.
I owe him an apology. I thought he was the standard defensive guy who was very like straight laced. No, he's got the fits going. He's got creative cursing. He's got a little bit of trash talk to his game. This would be a fun rivalry. I hope somebody doesn't wear. I know Garnett's not maroon, but I hope somebody wears black.
Different colors.
I just hope somebody wears black. Please.
No, is South Carolina? I don't know. I don't know the uniform combination.
Y'all can wear camo again. I would support that.
Yeah. Let's just say if. You know what? Actually, I don't think game script depends. I don't think that really determines whether or not Mike Elko is dropping very, very visible F-bombs on the sideline. Let's just say you're not going to see Mike Elko mic'd up for any of these games anytime soon. But that's fine. It's enough. Just the camera shots of him. I don't need the audio for that. It's almost better with the imagination.